Welcome to the Avanti Entrepreneur Podcast. I am Dave Mamano, your host, and this is the podcast where we help you to grow, scale your entrepreneurial enterprise to the next level. Do it with purpose, do it with passion, and do it with profit. And we are here today with somebody who has been involved in all those things on steroids, I'm going to say. We're here with Mitzi Purdue. Mitzi, welcome to the show.
What a joy to be here. And it's certainly a topic that interests me.
Excellent. Well, Mitzi, people might have heard of your last name, Purdue, if they ever have bought chicken in their life, right? So
I hope so.
You were married to Frank Purdue, and we're gonna talk about that for many years, and watched him. And I'm sure you were an intricate part of growing that from a very small family farm to, I think you said 20,000 employees, and a leader, if not the leader in the poultry industry, right? And to make it even more exciting, your father was one of the founders of the Sheraton Hotel enterprise, right? And so you were, but not only that, I mean, you have been doing so many things yourself, which is so exciting, and we're going to talk about that as well. So I'm going to read your bio, and then we're going to dig into all the details.
Go for it. I'm ready.
All right. So Mitzi Purdue is a science writer and health writer. She holds a BA with honors from Harvard University and an MPA from George Washington University. She is past president of the 35,000 member American Agro Women. She is also a former syndicated columnist for Scripps Howard, and her column, The Environment and You. And in the 1990s was the most widely syndicated environmental column in the country. Her television series, Country Magazine, was syndicated to 76 stations. She is the founder of Ceres Farms, S-E-R-E-S, is how you say it, Ceres Farms?
That's
the second generation family-owned vineyards that sell wine grapes to wineries such as Mondavi, Kendall Jackson, Bogley, and Toasted Head. Missy combines the experiences of three longtime family businesses. Her father, Ernest Henderson, co-founded the Sheraton hotel chain, and her late husband, Frank Purdue, was the second generation in the poultry company that today operates in more than 50 countries. She herself founded Ceres Farms in 1974. And in 2019, she founded Win This Fight, Stop Human Trafficking. So a lot of stuff going on. I'm also going to throw in, you don't have this in your bio, but I'm also going to throw in a new book that you are co-writing with Mark Victor Hansen, who is the co-author of many books, but his most famous series is Chicken Soup for the Soul series. And you are writing a book with him called And Also Win This Fight, right? Is there? Oh no, that's your Facebook page. The book is 21 tips to help you survive and thrive during the pandemic. So very timely as we are recording this in mid-April, which is here in New York, is hopefully the height of the pandemic, and it's going down. So very, very timely book, obviously, right? So, but great bio. You're doing a lot, and I went to your website, and it doesn't even cover half of what you're doing. Maybe later we'll get into your hobby of creating these really incredibly fancy eggs that sell for $2,500 a piece. But that's a whole nother story, right? You do a lot of speaking. You've written books, right? Doing a lot of incredible things. But I would love to hear. Maybe we should start where it all started for you as the daughter of a very successful businessman who co-founded Sheraton, and then meeting your husband. And then I really dig into what you're doing as well. How's that sound?
It all works for me.
All right. So yeah, give us the beginning of the journey for you, and how your entrepreneurial mindset and impact started.
I guess my interest in entrepreneurship started when I, as a little girl, got to witness something of my father's success. Because, even as a little girl, I look around me and I see the houses that my friends lived in, and I saw the house that we lived in that had a ballroom that holds 200 people, and that when we traveled, it was always in presidential suites. So it was pretty obvious to me that Daddy was a success. So I got curious. What did he do? How did he create these things? And so I began asking him questions. And how about for most of my life, from maybe 8 years on, I was endlessly asking him questions. And maybe your viewers, listeners, audience would be interested in some of the success tips that I learned from him.
I would love that. I'm sure they would be. I know I am.
Yay. Well, I'll start with one that I think I learned around 8 years old. And that is, in our summer place, there was a cabin on a mountain, and I watched my father chopping wood. He was chopping firewood. The logs had already been chopped down, and so he was chopping firewood. And I noticed that he did it just extremely well. You know, when somebody knows how to chop, there's this swinging motion, and if the axe head lands just right, you get a really good chop. And you know, even at 8 years old, it was clear to me that he knew what he was doing. But I asked him, Daddy, how come you're chopping wood? Because you know, you could afford to pay somebody to do it.
Right.
He said, well, first of all, I enjoy it and it's good exercise. But second, if I lost everything that I had, I know that I'd still land on my feet.
Right.
I could start over again, and it doesn't bother me to do. I mean, I like doing manual work. And he said something that I've just treasured and memorized, which he said, and this has to do with fear, by the way. He said, if I lost everything that I had, it wouldn't rearrange my mental furniture even a little bit.
Right.
And so that, I think that was very liberating for him, that he wasn't walking around scared of the decisions that he made,
Right.
because you know, he'd land on his feet no matter what.
Right. Yeah, he knew that at the end of the day, his own, you know, talents and instincts would continue to get him by, and he could rebuild. Right.
Yeah, and then I'll tell something that I don't think you'd ever hear in a Harvard Business School class, but it's something that a daughter would know, which is, you know, honestly, as his daughter, I asked him hundreds and hundreds of questions, but another one that stood out, I asked him, again, I was probably 12 or something, but how he made decisions.
Wow. That's
And
a big question for a 12-year-old.
Well, maybe I was 14, but anyway,
Right.
I was young. I mean, I know where I was when I asked this question, and that tells me how old I was. So I was somewhere around 12 or 14.
Yeah.
He told me, and again, this is he told me that the answer he was going to give me, it would be a good thing if this didn't show up in the New York Times business section. But he said he'd go to bed at night with a huge decision to make, where he has absolutely no idea which way to go. And it would be a pretentious decision where if he made the right decision, Sheraton would grow and expand and people would keep their jobs. If he made the wrong decision, catastrophe, you know, kind of fork in the road situation. He said that in his career at Sheraton, he probably had 10 of those.
Right.
And he said he'd go to bed having absolutely no idea what to do.
Yeah.
And then he'd dream. And he'd dream he was talking with his ancestors. And when he woke up, the answer was perfectly clear.
Wow. What a mastermind group, huh?
Well, okay, now I don't know if he meant that kind of metaphorically or if he
Right.
really thought he was talking with them. But
Yeah.
but he was an absolute deep believer in, you've got a problem, sleep on it. And you're going to come to a better decision if you give it 12 hours.
Right.
I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's, you know, I love that, like not making the decision right away instinctively. Let the dust settle a little bit, let your emotions settle a little bit, think it through. You know, talk to your relatives at night about it. I love it. You know, that goes back to Abraham Lincoln too. I love Abraham Lincoln, and he's got incredible business lessons, right? And
yeah, I adore him.
oh my God, and so many lessons from him. And what he would do oftentimes is he would write out either a response to a letter or a response to a problem that he had, and then he would put it in his desk for a day or two. And then he would look at it again and reevaluate it. Was that the best response? Would I send this letter now that my emotions have settled, right? Or is this the best decision based on what I know now, and I've calmed down a little bit, right? Had some time to think it through and talk to some people about it.
Well, I'm really ready to believe that your subconscious mind is grinding away, thinking of things, even when you're not.
Right.
And that, I mean, actually, that's worked in my own life when I have things that I can't answer, but I sleep on it, and it's much clearer the next day. But that was one of the things that built Sheraton.
So I definitely want to talk about all your great things, but obviously you have such fascinating people in your life. I want to talk a little bit more about them. So your dad, how did the whole idea to start Sheraton Hotels, like where and when and how did that start?
Okay, it started at the beginning of the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and by the way, he had a funny story that our audience might enjoy. And it's relevant to your question, although it won't be immediately relevant, but I'll plunge in and tell you.
Yeah.
Uh, when my mother got engaged to my father and met my grandmother, Berta Henderson, grandmother Berta said, "Don't marry Ernest. He'll never amount to anything.
Oh, jeez.
He can't, his problem is he can't stick with anything. You're going to end up poor."
Right.
And mother said, "I don't care. I love him. I want to be his wife." And they married. Well,
Right.
that was in the mid-20s. And actually, father didn't have much of any kind of success until the 30s. He went from one thing to another. He imported dogs. He built radios. He made cars. I mean, assembled cars from pieces and so forth.
Yeah.
He never could stick to anything. Until the hotel industry.
Yeah.
And then everything changed. He went from somebody who couldn't stick to anything to somebody who was just, I think, world class.
Yeah.
He bought one hotel, and the reason that he and his roommate from college and my uncle, the three men together, bought a hotel, and father discovered a magic secret, which I'll get into in a second, but let me get a little farther into how the hotel started.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the magic secret in a second, but the first hotel did well. With the profits, they bought another hotel. With the profits from that, they bought a third hotel. And now we'll get to the magic secret of how during the Depression, when hotels were going bankrupt right and left, and nobody was buying hotels, so somebody who had any money at all, they could buy a hotel, a great, big, wonderful hotel for 10 cents on the dollar.
Wow.
Well, so I asked my father, at the time I'm asking him, he probably had 400 hotels, so we're going back in history, like to the Great Depression. But he said one of the secrets for success, why he could make his hotels a success while everybody else was going bankrupt, was when he took over a hotel, he'd invite all the workers at the hotel, and there could be like 400 people, there might be 800 people, and he'd ask all of them to assemble in the ballroom of the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And father understood that everybody in his audience, the workers at the hotel, they're as demoralized as people can be because they're probably expecting to be fired. When somebody comes in, they usually bring their relatives and best friends and they clean house. But father didn't do that. The first words that he said when he's looking out at a whole ballroom full of very demoralized people, his first words were, "Every one of you keeps his or her job."
Wow. Right from the start. Yeah.
Well, because he's aware that they're probably not going to listen to him much when they're worried about are they going to be fired or not.
Right.
So then he went on to explain why they were keeping their jobs. He told them, "I believe in you. I know that together we can make this hotel a shining success. You'll see in a few months it's going to be profitable. It's going to be the best served, best hotel in the whole, most popular hotel in the whole city. And we're going to do it together. And
Wow.
I believe in you. And my job in this enterprise is to give you the resources and the encouragement to show the world just how good you are."
Wow. What a leader. What a leader, huh?
Yeah. And one of the things that he'd say was, or one of the things that he told me is, a leader's job is to give people a better vision of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So in his talk, he'd let them know that somebody wasn't making beds or carrying bags or tending bar. No, they're building the best hotel in the city, the most popular hotel in the city that was going to be an example to everybody else that we can turn this depression thing around.
Right.
What a message for people.
So, we talk about in today's world about culture building the team, family type of culture. And your dad instinctively knew that before it was like there were books about it and courses about it. It was just very innate and natural to him. Why do you think the hotel business caught out for him when he was doing all these different things from, what'd you say, dog importing to variety? I mean, but did he, do you think he just kind of came in contact with his superpower and like that was his thing?
That's such a good question. I'm not sure I've got a good answer to it. What I can say for certain is that when he had been floundering around and hadn't found his thing, at this point, he did find his thing. And maybe it was an overlap of his superpower, because he had more to say on the subject of what would turn a hotel around. Because he always used to say, it's not me that's going to make the hotel a success. It's the people, the team who's working for it. Right. And he did something else that, again, I don't think you'd read about this in a Harvard Business School review, unless maybe you should. But one of the things that he did was when he'd take over a hotel, when a hotel's is teetering on the verge of bankruptcy, or maybe it's gone bankrupt, it's gone to seed. The curtains are frayed, the rugs are stained. Nobody's been putting any money into it. So to bring it back to life, you've got to invest a lot in refurbishing it. And he knew that. So he had, he allowed a budget for that. So the day after he had told his employees, everyone keeps his job, I believe in you, the money that he would spend on refurbishing the hotel, it was never, at least at the beginning, it was never on the public rooms. Instead, the money he'd spend would be on the areas where the employees worked, like the employee kitchen, the employee showers, locker rooms, elevators. And so I asked him, that doesn't make sense. Wouldn't you, the money's going to come from the traveling public. Why are you putting the first refurbishing money into where the employees are?
Yeah.
And he said, because how do you signal to people better how important they are than where you put the first money?
Yeah. Smart, very smart, very smart. It was like he knew that, if you didn't plant the seeds and water the seeds, you weren't going to get the fruit and vegetables, right? And
he got that.
Yeah. And that I'm sure he didn't learn at Harvard, right? I mean, he just instinctively, it was like he knew that was important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing that he taught me, I'm not sure taught, that I absorbed because I listened to him talking about it. I did ask him about this because he'd tell me about standing in front of the audience and saying, you all keep your job. And I said, but maybe there's some dead wood and maybe they shouldn't all keep their jobs. And he had a completely different attitude. He said it was hard to get a new employee. You want somebody who's experienced, and it's really important to keep everybody who's there because they do know that particular job better than anybody else. So he actively wanted to keep them. But on top of that, he said persuasion comes in 3 flavors. And he had 3 choices of how he would motivate the people standing in front of them. Now, he could have been very aggressive and demanding and saying, this is his first time addressing his new employees. He could, the flavor 1, he could have been aggressive and said, shape up or you won't keep your job. But he said that kind of like aggressive, kind of almost angry approach, you might get compliance. Somebody might do what you're asking for, but they won't do it with their whole heart. They'll do it grudgingly.
Right.
Second flavor was bribery. He said he could have stood up there and said, hey, do a good job and you'll get a raise, or do a good job and you'll get a bonus. But he said the problem with bribery is it doesn't last and you have to keep upping the ante and it's too transactional. People will work for the bribe. He said, what's really important, if you really want to motivate people, he said, do it by inspiration. And his phrase was inspire, don't require.
Wow.
And the point of that was, throughout his whole career, people would go the extra mile for him because they weren't working for the bonus. They were working to make it the best hotel in the city.
Yeah.
So I loved the inspire, don't require.
Well, they weren't just working for the paycheck, right? They became
Yeah.
part of something bigger than the paycheck, right? And that requires it's almost like a football coach. You want to, like Vince Lombardi. I mean, like you want to win for him too, because you
Yeah,
believe in the
yeah,
leader, and you're part of a movement and something bigger than just a hotel, right?
yeah.
I
And,
love.
and how Father figured that out, I don't know, but he did.
Yeah, well, I mean, it must have been very intuitive to him to just know that, and that's probably the way he wanted to be treated, right? So, and then so during,
Well, actually, can I back up
yeah, please,
and since this is such an interesting question of where did he get this?
yeah, yeah,
Well, I don't think that he was born with it, because he told me that at age 26, since he couldn't ever stick with anything, he actually went to a career guidance counselor.
mm-hmm.
And he took a whole day of tests, and the career guidance counselor told him at the end of it, Mr. Henderson, you're a very smart man, but you have absolutely no ability to relate to other people.
Oh my goodness,
Basically, you're a social flop. And
right?
but because you're very bright, you can probably make a good living, maybe as a scientist, working in a laboratory,
Oh my
in,
God,
in a cubicle by yourself.
right? Oh my God, thank God he did not take that advice, right?
Well, my impression is that he took that as a challenge,
Yeah.
that he had this deficit. And to my knowledge, for the rest of his life, he worked on trying to figure out what makes people tick. It didn't come natural to him.
Yeah, so I'm glad he had that meeting with that career advisor, because maybe it was oh yeah, let me show you, right?
Actually, I think it was very much that,
Yeah,
because I know personally that he took the Dale Carnegie course, which
yeah.
was active way back then.
He probably
And
took it from Dale, right?
actually, he might have.
Yeah.
And then he also said that he would read How to Win Friends and Influence People, like every 10 years, he'd reread it.
Yeah.
And then he'd take all sorts of public speaking courses, psychology courses. He even, I even got to meet some very famous psychologists and psychiatrists because he'd have them over for dinner. Like, I don't know if B.F. Skinner is famous anymore.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah? Well, he was a house guest who'd spend weekends with us.
Wow. Isn't he, don't they call him like the father of modern psychology, I think, right? Yeah.
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 Or another person who could almost have that title was Edward Bernays, and he was a guest at our house. So
Wow.
Father just made a huge effort to learn everything that he could about psychology, and maybe he got so good at it because it didn't come naturally. He
Right.
didn't take it for granted. He learned it.
He worked at it. Yeah. 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 That's fantastic. Well, there's the age old question: can entrepreneurship be learned, or are you born with it? Right. And it's probably a little bit of both, right? So.
Well, in the case of getting along with people, I'm going to put my money in the notion that he learned it and it wasn't instinctive.
Yeah.
But as for having entrepreneurial instincts, I think there was something that he had a drive. I mean, the same drive that made him want to overcome this shortcoming of being a social flop and not understanding anybody.
Right.
That kind of drive was also the kind of drive that I think took him a long way as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So he had the drive, and he had deficits, but he overcame the deficits.
Wow. And so he built it from the beginning. And then, how many, well, I know he had 20,000 employees around,
Yeah,
right?
there were four. Well, we sold the company, by the way, when he died.
Okay.
But however, we've still stayed together as a family that invests together, which we've done since 1840.
Right. Wow.
Is that old or what?
In the genes, right?
Yeah.
How many hotels were there upon his death?
At the time of his death, 400.
Wow. Isn't that incredible? Isn't that incredible? So, and an iconic brand today, right? I mean, you think of the 3 or 4 iconic hotel brands, and obviously Sheraton, all these years later, is still one of them, right?
Yeah.
So,
Hey, I've got a cool story of where the name Sheraton came from.
yeah, that'd be great.
The third hotel that he ever bought was, I think it was somewhere in Massachusetts. I think Springfield, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And back somewhere around maybe 1933, 34, there was this hotel that was teetering on bankruptcy, and it had a great big neon sign. It cost $10,000 proclaiming that this was a Sheraton hotel.
Mm-hmm.
$10,000 back then was a lot. And Father, as a good New England Yankee, wasn't about to throw away a $10,000 sign.
Yeah.
But he wanted all the hotels to have the same name because it's easier to advertise them that way.
Right.
So that's how Sheraton got its name.
Oh, is that right? I never knew that. I mean, I know there's like,
no,
there's a Bill Marriott, right? And then Hilton, and so I you would assume that there's the founder was some type of Sheraton name, but that's interesting. I didn't know that.
I always valued it because he said there were a couple of reasons. One, why tear down a perfectly good sign?
Yeah.
And second, his name was Henderson, and he felt that wasn't euphonious.
Right. Yeah. And Sheraton, I mean, it's
Sheraton has a better ring to it.
Yeah.
And I kind of admired that Father wasn't such an egoist that he needed to have his name on it.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Or actually, I even more admired that he was objective enough to think Sheraton has a better ring to it than Henderson.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But isn't that cool to be able to stand back and...
It's amazing. That's an amazing story. That's a Harvard case study story right there too, right? On just...
Hey, Harvard, I'm ready.
Well, not needing that ego gratification of having your name on it, right? Like Jim Rohn says, one of his sayings were, amazing things can happen when nobody cares who gets the credit, right? And it's perfect for your dad, right? Oh, we got this $10,000 sign. I like the name. Guess what? That's the name of our hotel chain, right?
Yeah.
Yep. That's well, and I'm here in Rochester, New York. George Eastman invented Kodak, and what's Kodak, right? He made up the name. He thought there's rumor, a lot of rumors is he loved the letter K because his mother's name was K, and then he thought that there's a rumor that like what the sound that one of the first cameras that he made, the sound that it made sounded something like Kodak. I don't know how that's possible, but he just made up the name, and arguably it's still in business, obviously Kodak, but different business, but arguably in its day, between that and Coca-Cola, they're probably the biggest brand names of its day worldwide, right? And it's a made up name, right? Kodak, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't name it. He didn't have to, he ended up naming it Eastman Kodak, but everybody knows Kodak camera, not Eastman camera, right? So very interesting how these names came to be. So really, really fascinating, and that you got to not only grow up with that, but you were such a naturally inquisitive kid to ask so many questions along the way, right? So,
well, actually, it was the magic key to getting parental attention because kids want attention, and boy, that would just that was my open sesame. If I wanted Daddy really to pay attention to me,
right?
Why are you doing that?
Yeah. Maybe he did that on purpose. He wanted you to learn, right? Well, I'll give her attention when she asks me questions, right? That is. When did he pass away? If you don't mind me asking.
When 1967.
1967, the year before I was born. So.
Oh my God. And then sold the company the next year, and which was I think a great decision, and put the money into other things, and we still invest together. So life is good.
That's fantastic. So, so that was the first great business experience of your life with your dad, and then Frank Purdue had the good fortune of marrying you, and you were able to bring him to the next level as well. You like that?
I'm not sure that I had hardly any role in bringing him to the next level. I think my role was the cheering section.
Well, that's very important. Well, we were joking before we hit record, and that two great men in your life were great business leaders, right? And we were joking that Dan Rather, the famous broadcaster, he and his wife went back to her hometown for her high school reunion, many, many years later, and they ended up getting gas, and the owner of the gas station was her old high school boyfriend, right? And, they caught up a little bit, got back in the car, and Dan Rather said to his wife, well, if you stayed here and married him, instead of being married to a famous broadcaster, you'd be married to a gas station owner. And she goes, oh, contraire. She goes, if I married him, he would be a world famous broadcaster. So we're going to give you some credit. There's maybe there's no coincidences. That we're going to give you some credit that the two major men in your life just happen to be incredible business icons, right? So I'll say that. You don't have to, because I know you're modest.
Or at least I do a real good job of pretending to be modest.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, I mean, being a great supporter, I mean, that obviously really, really important. So Frank Purdue, once again, I believe he got the business from a second generation, but it was very small. And then he brought it to a huge brand, huge company, 20,000 employees, right? A brand known all over the country, if not the world. And in fact, when our mutual friend, Mark Victor Hansen, introduced us via email, I was really excited. And this is a little side note, that when I was in high school and I was taking my public speaking class, for our final, we had to take on the persona of somebody famous. It could be anybody, and develop our speech based on that person. And your late husband, back, I graduated high school in 1987, and probably a good part of the heyday of Purdue. Frank Purdue really had built out this great personality with his commercials, and he became world famous because of the great advertising and marketing campaign where he was the star of. Where he was funny, a little self-deprecating, but just really, you ended up loving the guy. And I chose my persona to be Frank Purdue, so for my final, which I got an A+, by the way, I was Frank Purdue. And to think that years later, here I'm talking to his wife, right? So would love you to share a little bit of your experiences with you and Frank, and growing that company from, once again, to a small chicken farm to really a nationally known and globally known company when it comes to the poultry business.
Well, I will tell a wife's eye view of it. Although I actually wrote a book about him, Tough Man, Tender Chicken.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, available on Amazon, everybody.
I love it. Tough Man, Tender Chicken.
Well, let's see, where do I even begin? He had the same attitude towards the people who worked with him that my late father did. And in fact, he would never say that anybody worked for him. People worked with him.
Yeah, I love that.
And I used to feel that a lot of his waking time was spent on ways of making the people who worked with him feel important. And I'll give a couple of examples. When we'd go through the plants, which we did just continuously, and I got to tag along, I mean, I'm just so grateful that he let me, but I would always be astonished by how many names he knew. Say we're going through a chicken plant, and there's somebody working, maybe they're hanging the chickens, and it's a repetitive job, and Frank was famous, like my father, that if you started working with him, you probably worked with him the rest of your life. But he noticed you. The number of people whom he introduced me to by name was just staggering. I mean, like thousands and thousands. And he'd tell me, Mitzi, I want you to meet Delcy. Delcy's been here for 25 years and she hasn't had a single sick day. Or meet Tony. Tony's son just got into college.
Wow.
And so the number, and then something else. I've been told that it's something of a rarity for somebody who's head of a company that big to walk through the plants and know people and ask how they're doing. And another thing that would do, very often would eat in the company cafeterias, and he'd just talk with people there. And I used to notice a couple of things. Actually, I hope I noticed a lot of things, but among them, he never had the attitude that, I'm the big important boss. It was more, we're all part of this team, and how can I help you? Yeah, is that not cool?
It's amazing, and it's
very egalitarian.
Well, and it's look at your father and your husband. I mean, success leaves clues, right? And talking about what did they put first, right? Your dad, he redid the rooms of where the employees spent their time, right? And then your husband, knowing the names, eating with them, talking to them, probably getting thoughts and feedback from them about how could the company be better, right? And
Yeah. And
it's
I
so
want to say
important.
something else that in my 79 years, and by the way, yes, I am 79 and I'm proud of it.
Yeah,
But
well, and you don't look anywhere near 79, so congratulations.
oh, well, there's an answer to that. Eat chicken.
Oh, there you go.
But I noticed something that he did that I rarely see in other human beings. And that is he absolutely welcomed criticism or objections or if he would rather hear about a problem than about something that he was doing right. I mean, he encouraged that because his view was, yeah, I enjoy hearing what I've done right, but I can't do anything about that. But if there's a problem, I can help make it better and I can work on it.
Yeah.
And what a really cool thing for the head of a company to listen to, whether it was somebody working on the line or a trucker or whoever, if they had a criticism or a suggestion or a problem, he wanted to hear it.
Yeah.
And then something that I just treasure. There was a man, his name was Don Mabe. He started out as a flock supervisor, which that's sort of like, well, you go around to visit the different flocks and you find out who's having problems and what you can do for them. So it's very much an entry-level job. He went from flock supervisor to eventually became part of management. And he was the person who argued with Frank the most. I mean, I remember once he had a fight with Frank and he told Frank, now for this story to make sense, please remember that hang gliding is a very dangerous hobby to have.
Mm-hmm.
He told Frank, what you're suggesting is crazy. You should retire. You should take up hang gliding.
Right. Oh, wow.
So for probably 40 years, these two men just fought with each other.
Yeah.
But Frank trusted him because somebody who will speak up to you and tell you when you're wrong, Frank just utterly valued it. And when Frank retired as president, the person that he appointed to succeed him was Don Mabe.
Yeah.
Is that not cool? The leader who's going to listen to everybody.
Well, that's a huge lesson because a lot of leaders want to surround themselves with yes men, as they say. Oh, yes, boss, you're right. Oh, yes, boss, what a great decision. You're so smart. Whereas,
I've got to jump in with something else. Forgive me.
please.
Actually, I shouldn't do that, but
No. I encourage it, please.
One of the things that I wrote a book on Frank, and Tough Man Tempted Your Chicken, everybody.
Yeah. On Amazon.com.
On Amazon.com. I interviewed 143 different people for this. And one of the things that it was just a common theme. When he'd come into a meeting, he's the big boss, it's his, he's the owner, his name appears on your paycheck.
Yeah.
It would be a great temptation to bend yourself into a pretzel to, what does Frank want to hear? But one of Frank's superpowers was he wouldn't let people know what he wanted to hear. Yeah. So you go into a meeting and he's going to listen attentively to every idea. And so there wasn't this business of bending into a pretzel trying to guess what he wanted to say and then saying it. And his attitude was, there's a lot of wisdom in this room and I want to tap into it. And I'm not going to do that if they're only saying what they think I want to hear. And his other saying that I was really fond of was, none of us is as smart as all of us.
Right.
So he felt it was just completely counterproductive to have people know ahead of time what he wanted. And then from his point of view, to have his mind made up before he goes in, that's kind of a waste too, because if none of us is as smart as all of us, it would just simply be dumb not to listen carefully to everybody.
Well, Mitzi, there's three really important lessons in what you just said, right? Is surround yourself not with yes men or women, but with no men or women, right? Like yes. That they have the courage to say, no, that's not a great idea, or no, can I challenge that? And having the leader be like, yes, please challenge me, right? So that's lesson number one. Number two, your husband did not go into the meeting and pre-frame the issue or pre-frame his opinion of what should happen, right? Yep. He was quiet and he listened to everybody else. And then I'm sure as a leader, he made the decision based on listening to everybody's feedback. And at the end of the day, he can't agree with everybody, but he'll take, like a buffet, you take what you want, and then you make your decision from there. Right. And then the third thing is, and I love this saying, and I say it all the time on my podcast, is, and I didn't make it up, but if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Right. Right. And it seems like Frank once again knew that instinctively. Like, and maybe at times he was the smartest person in the room, but he didn't act like it. Right. He wanted to hear other people's feedback, and everybody, I'm sure, was his superior in some way. And he wanted to harness that from these people, and so that he can make a better decision. So I think those are 3 important lessons that I just learned from you.
Can I add a fourth?
Oh my God. I was hoping you would.
Here it comes. I used to notice something extraordinary about Frank when he was in one of these meetings where he wanted to get opinions. And that is, I love to study body language. And if you're a leader, you probably, your shoulders are back, you're standing up tall, you're taking up a lot of space.
Yeah.
Frank didn't do that. I don't know what brilliant intuition or whatever, because I don't think he consciously thought of what I'm about to describe. But here's what Frank would do when he was in a meeting. The kind where, if he's being leader, yeah, he's taking up space and his chest is out and his voice is low and authoritative. But if he's in one of those meetings where he wants to draw out the best ideas from everybody who's there, his posture would change. He would be almost shy. He would be like his shoulders maybe hunched just a teensy bit forward. His head, instead of thrown back and being authoritative, it was basically, he was transforming himself almost like an actor might into a member of the group, not the dominant person there.
Right.
And what genius led him to realize that his posture would influence how much the group would bring out its best.
Yeah. So important. Yeah. So he would take on the role of what he needed at that time. So that's amazing too. That's another great lesson. Number 4. I love it. That's beautiful.
I wonder how many other people do that, and where did he get the instinct to do that? But
well, it seems like your husband and your father could have run any company with those leadership qualities, right? Because you could take those exact qualities and put them into any company, and if they're sincere and authentic, you could succeed, right? Those are just really bona fide great leadership skills and qualities to have to run any company.
And one of the in the last few years, employee engagement has been a real talking point for everybody. So I've recently started looking at some of the things Father did and things that Frank did from the point of view of how much do they create employee engagement. And I'm going to bet that you're 1,000 times more engaged if you're contributing to the company being great with your ideas, and that the head of it is going to listen to you.
Absolutely.
That's got to be a magic key to employee engagement, that you're listened to and respected, and not just some steamrollers going over you.
Right. Yeah. Well, it makes it a two-way enjoyable experience, right? If you are, the leader, that, you are, sincere and genuine with these qualities, and then you're getting the response back from the team and the success with the business, but mostly knowing that you're creating just a great place to work, affecting families, creating joy in the workplace. Right.
Yeah.
And then, really the success of the company, becomes like, wow, this is great too. Right. But it all starts with putting the team first. Right. So Mitzi, you know what? I have to tell you something. I think you are going to win an award with me, because I do try to keep these podcasts around a half hour to maybe 40 minutes due to the attention span and time. And we still have to talk about you, right? So we've talked about your father, we talked about your husband's company, and we're going to talk about you. What I propose that we do is that you're going to be my only guest so far in almost 4 years, where we're going to have a part 2 of
Oh,
our
I love it.
podcast.
I love it. I love it. You make me so happy.
Yeah. So there's, so we're gonna do another episode with you next, and we're gonna focus just on what you're doing, all the incredible accomplishments and impact you're making in the world. So, so Avanti listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this interview, and thank you so much, Mitzi, for sharing the experiences and the journey and the wisdom that you took part in it and that you learned from your father and your husband, and sharing that with the Avanti entrepreneurs. Really appreciate that, because we're really influencing a lot of minds of people that want to start businesses someday, or that already have businesses or going to the next level. And on the next episode, Mitzi, we're going to dig into what you're doing and have another great episode.
I'd like nothing more because, at my age, the urge to share is just enormous. That's what motivates me. So you're making possible what I most want to do. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being willing to share, because you don't have to do this, right? And you still are getting up every morning with a gleam in your eye, making a difference. And I love that very much. So Mitzi, thank you so much. We're going to have another episode very soon. And Avanti listeners, stay tuned next week, because you'll hear, we're going to go more into detail about Mitzi's, great impact that she's making in today's world. So Mitzi, thanks again for your time. Totally appreciate it.
Thank you more than I can say.
Excellent. And Avanti listeners, Avanti family, thank you for your time. I'm always honored to be part of your day. Go to AvantiEntrepreneur.com to, I think we're on like 170 episodes now. We have so many great episodes there as well. Always on your favorite podcast app. A lot of other resources at AvantiEntrepreneur.com. Make sure to have a great day and stay awesome.